Great, let's make a start. So welcome everybody to this webinar this morning, where we are joined by Jade Blackburn of WTA Group. WTA Group are one of the FDEA service providers in the logistics field. So we've recently had lots of logistics questions, always regarding in our WhatsApp group and via our export help desk, just proving that there's still ongoing issues with Europe for many exporters. So we're really interested to hear what Jade has to say. She'll be giving us an update on Brexit impact and where we are currently. So there will be time for questions for Jade. I'm sure many of you have got questions regarding logistics. So you can either pop them in the chat box as we go along, or pop your camera on at the end and put your hand up, and then we will come to you with any questions that you've got. So Jade, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great, thank you. Hi everybody. So thanks for the introduction. So just briefly, we always do a bit about me. So from our website, so very much in third person. So I'm passionate about supporting UK's biggest manufacturing sector, food and drink, and I'm loved by our clients, so it's been told, because I'm quite super friendly and honest approach. We've really built up my expertise in the food and drink industry, by placing very close attention to Brexit and focusing on the nuances of moving these goods, and consequently I'm comfortable advising businesses of all sizes in this sector. A little bit not work related about me. I'm into hiking. I'm currently doing the May Walking Challenge, trying to do 25,000 steps a day. It's killing me. I'm a big Nottingham Forest fan, and obviously my third passion in life is helping food and drink brands negotiate the complexities of Brexit. So we always like to put a little bit of a relevant switch to that. So a little bit about WTA. So we are a 100 years old freight industry. But it's a family-run business. But due to our independent nature, it does mean that we are still very agile, robust support companies, with a really great degree of flexibility, and with lots of knowledge of and expertise within the food sector and industry as a whole. We are really, the big thing that doesn't touch on there is we're really key on our personal approach, so really working with you to really understand your businesses, the troubles that you have, and we really like to seek out obviously solutions or ways that we can support you, whether it's as a customer or as just generally as a sector question as well. So I was saying to Mel beforehand, that the WhatsApp group is really great because actually we get to hear the problems that you're having at ground level, and we can obviously either advise on that accordingly or actually build in support around that as well. So why are we here today? What we're going to talk about? So the key goals of the webinar is to obviously help shippers avoid supply chain shocks as the post-Brexit world continues to unfold. It's 4 years down the line and we're still talking about it. To improve businesses' understanding of the trading landscape, the logistics and customs when trading with the EU. To help grow business export portfolios, we'll cover market opportunities in the coming slides as well, although obviously we don't have too long to obviously go into each in great detail, and also to demystify the upcoming legislation changes on trade between the UK, Northern Ireland and the EU as well. Okay. So this is what we're going to cover. So the Brexit overview is obviously the deadlines, the key dates of the past and still the future. We're going to look at the statistical look at how Brexit initially impacted trade with the EU, the latest information for moving goods between the UK and Northern Ireland, the details of the Windsor framework, the safeguarding the Union document published in February this year. Also the UK-EU trade threats, with most of the Brexit transition behind us. Where do the threats now lie? We're going to touch briefly on the Red Sea crisis and how that actually is impacting the EU trade as well. And also, obviously, the EU trade opportunities as well, what opportunities there. And I have built in time for a Q&A at the end as well. do that whole next slide, please. So a brief history of the delays. So up until 31st of January 2020, the UK traded freely with the EU as part of the single market and customs union. And then we entered the transition period from 31st of January until the 31st of December 2020. The UK had, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words today, sorry. I'm full of cold as well, I should add. Until the 31st of December 2020, the UK had officially left the EU, and although trade continued freely as part of this transition period, from January 1st, 2021, the transition period came to an end, and customs declarations for goods moving between the UK and EU came into effect, with the new health certification requirements and sanitary and phytosanitary SPS checks on animals and plant produce introduced for goods exported from the UK to the EU. SPS checks on goods imported into the UK from the EU to be phased in as part of the border target operating model. So this really put the UK exporters at a cost disadvantage in the EU market, as most of their European counterparts in the EU didn't require health certification for products to enter the UK, but UK exporters did to get them into the EU. A case study that we feature is the fish exporters in Scotland, as an example of the industry which had really faced issues when health certificates were implemented for the UK exports. So in January 2021, some fish prices fell 8% at Peterhead Market in Scotland as they were held up just because of the new customs requirement. And this issue was just amplified by the perishable nature of fish as well. So, oh, excuse me. We continue with more deadlines in the Brexit debacle. So the UK delays the implementation of full border checks of imports from the EU 5 times, from March 2021, September, December, and then through to April 2022, with the latest being August 2023. The reasons for doing so were given to allow businesses more time to be ready. We had obviously had the pandemic in between as well, which was delightful for us all, and the unresolved Northern Ireland Protocol. And 31st of January 2024, finally the introduction of the health certification of imports of medium risk animal products, plant products, and the high risk foods and feed of non-animal origins from the EU. The removal of pre-notification requirements for low risk plants and plant products from the EU as well. So anything less than medium risk goods do not require a European health certificate, which means in effect the EU firms are still at a competitive advantage when exporting to the UK compared to the UK firms exporting to Europe. For example, honey and canned pet food are 2 product types where EHC is still required. It's not still required, is required, sorry, for GB to EU, but not EU to GB. We continue with even more deadlines, as we've all lived and breathed this, but the introduction of April this year of the documentary and risk-based identity and physical checks on medium risk animal products, plants and plant products, and high-risk food and feed of non-animal origin from the EU. Existing inspection of high-risk plant products from the EU will be moved from destination to border control posts, and health certification and routine checks on low-risk animal products, plants and plant products from the non-EU countries will be removed, as well as reduction in physical and identity checks levels on medium-risk animal products from the non-EU countries. We've seen, obviously, we've had disruptions at key ports such as Dover and Hull when this was introduced, but it really doesn't appear to be too widespread with the right documentation. Goods are really, well, we're seeing that they're flowing through relatively smoothly now. And hopefully that's the case that you've all experienced as well. So, and then October this year, obviously the upcoming deadline is the requirement of the safety and security declarations for imports into GB from the EU or from other territories where the waiver applies, as set out in the original target operating model. So alongside this, a reduced data set for imports and use of the UK single trade window will be introduced, removing duplication where possible, across different pre-arrival data sets, such as pre-lodge customs declarations. So we continue to obviously follow the latest timeline that the government sets out, and that can be read on the Border Target Operating Model website, which is available online. I can share that link afterwards for anybody who's not got that. How we're supporting our clients and how we're, obviously, we put it as a top tip, but is by grouping products of the same risk category together to prevent, obviously, low risk items moving through really freely with reduced requirements and less chance of having a check. So that's not always possible, but that's how initially we're trying to support our clients, and that's the advice that we're giving to our customers. When we think about that 4-year journey and all the deadlines that we've just experienced, it's fair to say that food and drink sector has been among the most disrupted by Brexit because of import controls and checks introduced. So added to this, we've had the uncertainty of and changes of COVID-19 as well. But the value of UK food exports to the EU dropped 2.4 billion in the immediate aftermath after Brexit. Whereas the EU food exports to UK didn't suffer anything like this at all, mainly because implementation has been delayed and staggered. But, well, that's a big but trade has recovered and it's now at record levels. So data on UK imports and exports from the EU to Q3 of 2023, you can see that food and drink exports to the UK is at 3.2 billion in the first 3 quarters of the year. So it's really bounced back, and it's obviously on an upward trajectory, which we are hoping, and you're obviously on your behalf as well, that it's obviously got an onward trajectory as well. So an update on the Windsor framework was announced in February 2023 and entered into force on the 1st of October. This replaced the Northern Ireland Protocol. So the arrangements are designed to significantly reduce the formalities, checks and controls of the movement of goods from Great Britain into Northern Ireland across the emerging post-Brexit Irish Sea border. Trusted traders authorised under the UK Internal Market Scheme can move their goods through a green lane and using a reduced data set as well. To bring the Democratic Union Party back into power sharing after the Windsor Framework, the UK government signed the Safeguarding Union Agreement in January 2024, which provided a basis for the DUP to return to Stormont. Within that agreement, a raft of measures for businesses were to be aware of, that they need to be made aware of. So the legislation guaranteeing Northern Ireland's unfettered access to the UK's internal market, we amended the UK Internal Marketing Act, replacing the green lane. You replace the green lane with the UK internal market system, with a commitment from the government that more than 80% of the freight movement will take place under the system. And the not for EU labelling is now applicable for all of the agri-food products sold in the UK, irrespective of whether they're going into Northern Ireland. Designed to ensure that no incentive arises for business to avoid placing goods on the Northern Ireland market. The special labelling for Northern Ireland was feared would put some business off the market altogether. I know with the FDEA, there's been a few talks on the labelling as well. I've obviously seen the change on that as well. But the key dates for the introduction of the not for EU labelling on all the UK agri-food products is, so obviously October 2023, the meat and fresh fruit dairy products, October 2024, all other dairy products. With July 2025, composite products, fruit, vegetables and fish. So the establishment of an Intertrade UK, a body which is going to promote trade within the UK and provide advice to facilitate business across the UK, and hopefully can support us all, obviously make it much more clear as well. With the of the upcoming October 2024 dates and the July 2025 dates. And as with everything, preparation is key. And advice, key to prepare well in advance of these dates, fully understand your requirements, work with your partners so that they understand them as well, and really don't kick the can down the road, so to speak. I know we've obviously we can hope that things get delayed, but it doesn't seem to be the case again. So just with all of that as in the background, we've still got the upcoming threats with the UK and the EU to trade. So despite most of the UK and EU trading relation changes being bedded in by the end of 2024, there's still many risk factors to be aware of. So the diverging legislation is a big one. As the UK and EU grow apart, regulation around food and drink standards and labelling could get increasingly divergent, meaning it's more complicated and costly for UK products to sell on the EU market and vice versa. Businesses must navigate dual regulatory environments. You need investment in internal compliance mechanisms and third-party audits to ensure that adherence to those regulations it takes place, and that's all additional costs that you didn't previously have, or we didn't previously have. Novel ingredients and additives, chemical toxicology, testing requirements, and residual pesticides levels in food. All areas are at heightened risk of further regulatory divergence. A recent example of that is the titanium dioxide, which is used in bakery products, soups, broth, salads, savoury-based sandwiches, sandwich bread, processed nuts and more. Since 2022, the additive has not been permitted in the EU, but it is still allowed in the UK. This is making sure that you're aware of those diverging legislations. Environmental legislation divergence is a particular threat too. For example, an example of this is the EU emissions trading system, which was widened to maritime transportation for the EU in January 2024, meaning shippers will have to pay surcharges on goods arriving at EU ports, but the UK has not yet introduced that as legislation. So further environmental legislation is the EU packaging and packaging waste regulation, which now states that all packaging placed in the EU market must be recyclable by 2030. Again, the UK hasn't introduced this yet, or introduced this. So regulatory compliance threatens to become an increasing cost for business in doing international trade, but the same is true for the EU market, and EU companies looking to do market with us as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. It slowly becomes more difficult to manufacture products for two separate sets of legislative requirements. Obviously, we try and put a top tip on every page, but our top tip is just to remain agile, work with trusted partners, really closely monitor those developments to adapt those compliance strategies promptly. We've recently been working with one of our clients who's a major pet food manufacturer who were in trouble importing goods into the UK, and their vets had made an error on the EHC food, and their goods were at risk of being denied by customs. But we've got a lovely food team here, and we've moved quickly to correct the discrepancy between the trailer load and the EHC forms, meaning that the goods actually flow through without delays. So it's really important to use supply chain partners who are experienced in customs and food logistics. It's really key for success. So that the responsibility of that knowledge and the compliance it's a shared responsibility as well. It doesn't just sit on you and your teams, your internal teams. Another factor as well is the local authority-based food standards enforcement that might cause further divergence of the standards within the UK in the future. So local authorities are subject to different financial pressures, and therefore resource limitations and skill shortages. So that presents a further issue which can add to the party that we're all having. So labour shortages. Although already there's been a real issue within the food sector in 2021 and 2022, UK governments predict these labour shortages are set to continue. The UK's stance on immigration is getting tougher, which presents a further labour shortage problem to food and drink sectors, particularly with the UK's ageing population and low birth rate. Roles where this is particularly a concern is obviously software development, automation, first line managers, engineering, sales, hygiene, cleaning roles, food packers, you name it. There's a job everywhere that's listed on that risk. And that's further hampered by the UK skilled worker visa minimum salary rising from 26,000 to 38,700, making international recruitment really more difficult and making much more tough. So, and then a further factor which is impacting as a result of the changes is the data sharing. So reduced data sharing presents problems to our sector, who are selling products across the UK and EU. So the long-term implications of reduced data obviously aren't known yet, but an example of that is the rapid alert system for food and feed on incident reporting has been restricted since 2021, and so that really does threaten our food safety, scientific collaboration, food fraud detection as well. So I want to touch on obviously rules of origin and compliance as well, because I know there was a few conversations through the WhatsApp group in particular about complying with the new rules of origin regulations on trade. On identifying that. So to comply with new rules of origin regulations on trade between UK and EU, because of free trade and cooperation agreements can be tricky depending on their destination. So what proof you need to provide depends entirely on the product type and destination market. So it's not a straightforward answer, unfortunately, but we obviously recommend or advise everyone to use the government's trade tariff pages for guidance on the specific product, of which I've included the URL and step-by-step instructions on the screen as well, and it will tell you exactly what proof is acceptable for your goods. But in those instances, we are more than happy. We have a fantastic customs and compliance team in-house here, so if you do ever have those queries, we're happy to advise. So it's an office of support on those instances, so do reach out if that's the case. I know I did follow up with the WhatsApp conversation. Yeah, that WhatsApp group's great. So yeah, and then the Red Sea crisis. So whilst although it's not directly impacting the EU trade, obviously, it does continue to disrupt all involved in international logistics. So container ships continued being diverted around the Red Sea, which has caused a huge spike in container freight rates from the start of the year. And there's really no prospect of the Red Sea being reused or reopened whilst the threat remains. So rates have increased dramatically between Asia and Europe again in May because of higher than expected demand. There's been an increase in blank sailings and general rates increase of costs imposed by shipping lanes. So it's fun. It's obviously an experience again for us all. But how does that impact us with the EU, with the trading with the EU? Well, the vulnerability of it really comes from the fuel price. So as tanker vessels are forced to transit around the Cape, fuel has been trending upwards since December. The shippers are really exposed to fuel trade surcharges from hauliers. And hauliers themselves are really struggling because they typically would only add on a margin of 1 or 2%. The shocking fact of for the last 12 months, 450 hauliers have gone bust in the UK. And so that's, we're seeing companies absolutely disappear. So those increased costs are being passed on. Whilst there is the fuel duty freeze announced in the spring budget, it doesn't really alleviate the risk here, unfortunately. So it's it's ongoing. We're being obviously affected on all sides. So our tip for this is just really knowledge is power. So really stay informed on world affairs, even if it's not a trade lane, even if you're not doing trade with it from the Far East or that's affected by that. It really does have a ripple effect across the industry. and it really is important, to keep informed in that position, so that you can, obviously you can't predict, but you can stay up to date and appraised all those situations as well. So whilst it feels like this perhaps it's been quite a doom and gloom talk so far, or what I've been touching on so far about all the changes and stuff, there's a huge opportunity, and we're seeing that with our clients as well, and we're seeing huge growth with them. So I've touched on, let's see, 3 for here. So obviously Germany. So Germany is the huge opportunity with the largest and wealthiest EU country. It's got 4.26 trillion GDP. They're grasping, which is good. They're typically UK businesses have only ever competed at the high end of this market, but interest is really another range is really starting to grow. Don't be put off by the recent gloomy outlook for the German economy as well. The German consumer is becoming much more open-minded about new flavours and products, and also becoming more health conscious. So in many cases, as is many cases with the other European markets as well. We've seen significant growth opportunities in spirits, including low and non-alcoholic spirits as well, confectionery, sweets and savoury snacks, vegan, organic and free from ranges as well. And like the British consumer in Germany, there is interest in products with sustainable credentials as well. So demand for private label goods is from retailers growing in this market too. So packaging, although that's a full standalone conversation, but labelling is very important to the German consumer in their buying decisions. So ensure that your product is compliant with the German Packaging Act as well. Spain, I know again from the WhatsApp, there's been issues with getting samples there, and it's a topical point, but it really is, food and drink exports to Spain has surged 7.4% in 2023, which is the biggest increase in any of the EU nations. So it's up to 881 million. So there's over 16 million tourists there, most in the coastal areas. So, but there are strong demands for gourmet and premium products as well. The logistic considerations for Spain is the road freight is 3 to 4 days for full or partial loads, and what we've certainly experienced, and it's been touched upon, is obviously the proof of origin can be a challenge in exports to Spain depending on the type of product, but be sure to research that your requirements fully, and make sure you do that up front ahead of them being collected even. So work with your logistics partner on that. And then Sweden, Scandinavia's largest economy. There's opportunity for the UK products, UK producer of health, organic and natural and vegetarian plant-based goods, as well as craft beer, craft alcoholic drinks as well. So they're really they have a really niche and innovative innovative products in Sweden. And the route to market here is typically through a distributor. So finding that distributor is key for obviously being successful in this market. Again, the logistic consideration is 3 to 4 days on the road, but for road freight to get to Sweden. So have I got on a separate slide? Sorry, I'm not moved myself forward. So because of the departure from the EU and the UK, that we have obviously signed the free trade deal with the CPTPP, which is the trading bloc of 11 countries, which we can all try and remember. So Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Mexico, Malaysia, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore and Vietnam. So ratification, I think that was 11. It does represent 13.4% of the global GDP. So, and we are expecting the ratification of this deal expected in the second half of this year. So, over 99% of the UK current goods that exports to the CPTPP countries will be eligible for zero tariffs, improving good market access for the British firms. So, it's a strong consideration. In 2022, the UK exported 2.4 billion of of food and drinks to these countries in their current prices, with Singapore swelling 24.3% to nearly 600 million in 2023. So there's huge opportunities with those markets. So we've seen great success with whiskey and chocolate and dairy products, really highlighting, really seeing the benefit of those as this changes really. Obviously, really leveraging the British culture as well, and anything that sort of symbolises British culture or British products. So there's really a wealth of opportunity out there to really build on. Well, obviously, as we grow, and we're obviously the FDEA are doing some great support with the talks and the access to buyers as well, and that will hugely support everyone with their knowledge as well. So yeah, it's really a really positive thing. So I think that's where we come on to Q&A. So I can see there's 2 chats that pinged up and lit up my screen. So I don't know if they have direct questions now.
I think it was more just to add some clarification on the not for EU labelling. I don't know, Sandra, do you want to jump in and have a chat about the work you've been doing on the export steering group you're part of regarding this?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, thanks, Mel. Don't know if you can see me. I've got my screen turned a funny way. So am I? Yeah. Not looking at the sky or anything. Yeah, morning everybody. Yeah, thank you, Jade. That's really insightful. Clearly, you and the team have got a huge amount of knowledge in that space, which is very valuable and great to have you as part of the community. Yeah, you're quite right to highlight the not for EU because it is obviously very topical, and it's something that the FDA are continually writing to ministers about. Just a quick recap in terms of the process. There was a DEFRA consultation, which I think went out middle of March, or the deadline was middle of March, and there's a sort of 12-week review. We're in touch with the Food and Drink Federation, with other trade associations who are working together to ensure that we're sharing what we know, and continuing to raise the profile to say that, you know, whilst we totally respect the need to protect supply to Northern Ireland, the sledgehammer to crack a nut analogy just seems very appropriate here, in that basically anyone who currently goes through a border control post to get their products into the EU will have to label their products not for EU in the GB market. And what that means is it takes away the ability for a lot of companies to have a single product for sale in both the UK and the EU, which will obviously add a lot of cost and duplication and make it harder for them to be competitive. So if you do fall into those categories, or if you're still a little bit unsure, do reach out to me. Very happy to sort of signpost you. Thank you, Rebecca from Ashbury. I can see you put the link to the actual legislation. It's unfortunately it's one of those EU documents that you have to jump to Annex 2 and go back to Annex 3 and try and work out what is and isn't included. But we've done a little summary of what we consider to be exempt goods, and basically anything that's shelf stable composite pretty much is exempt. So I think there's just a lot of confusion, and although it's not actually legislation that's been passed, it's not really in place yet for dairy and composites, you will see when you go to the supermarket that a lot of companies have already made the decision just to label it all not for EU, to enable them to use stock for both GB and Northern Ireland. And we've heard of a couple of companies have said they're not going to have a not for EU option, which will impact on the wholesalers who send UK product out to a number of markets. So yeah, it's a real minefield. I think we're being heard by government. I think ultimately the decision lies with the Prime Minister as to whether it gets through or not, and I guess a lot of that will depend on timings of elections and what happens next, as to whether it just sort of is a can that gets kicked down the road a bit. You know, clearly their priority is to retain the Northern Irish government, and everybody totally gets that and supports that. But yeah, we've got to find a way that it doesn't impact exporters in quite such a severe way. So yeah, I'll pop my email into the chat if anyone wants to pick up on that conversation, but I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. So now just going to open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions for Jade regarding logistics to the EU that they want to share? Or any issues they want to flag that they might be having at the moment?
Shall I jump back in, Mel? I think I'm sure they've all got lots. They're all being shy. And I know they're shared a lot on the Friday calls, aren't they? But yeah, perhaps a question to Jade on samples and small loads, getting those out to the EU, and whether that's a service WTA can offer. Because I know that is something comes up a lot, and couriers, as we know, don't have the ability to take samples.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Mel picked that up with me beforehand as well. So it is something that we do a lot of support with our obviously clients, and we are able to offer that support. I know reading through the group, it was obviously suggested sending it through as for personal use, and you know, whilst we wouldn't particularly agree with that or support that, I understand that's a route for action, but definitely if you've got those issues, do get in touch. We can help with that, and obviously make sure there's a route into that market, because chances are we've got another load going in anyway, so we can actually leverage that experience. So we're more than happy to support with any samples going anywhere. So do reach out.
Yeah, I think that's really been key on the WhatsApp group. Lots of questions about samples, particularly to Spain, getting stopped, and you know, people just sort of banging their head against a brick wall, not sure what to do with it. If you aren't part of the WhatsApp group, I do recommend that you just send me your mobile number so I can add you. I think probably most of you are already on it, and I think even if you're just a quiet spectator, some of the things that come up are normally quite useful for you. So I will share Jade's presentation slides. I'll share Jade's contact details with everybody that joined the webinar today, unless anybody else has got anything further to add. Thank you very much, Jade, for your time. And yes, so yeah, like I said, if you have any questions specifically about things that you're sending to Europe or the EU, then please do get in contact with Jade. She's more than happy to have a chat with you about any requirements that you've got. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And we'll be sending round the recording afterwards. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.